The subcommittee will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare a recess of the subcommittee at any time. Members of the full committee who are not members of the Subcommittee on Terrorism and Illicit Finance may participate in today's hearing. All members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit extraneous materials to the chair for inclusion in the record. This hearing is entitled Illicit Use of Virtual Currency and the Law Enforcement Response. I now recognize myself for 3 minutes to give an opening statement. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Today's hearing is going to examine the exploitation of virtual currencies and how law enforcement is working to identify and disrupt their use to fund illicit activities through both mainstream and dark web marketplaces. With today's advancements in the evolving world of financial technology, the ability to deposit, transfer, and raise money is at our fingertips. While this is a significant improvement for those who struggle to access the financial system, the ease of transacting also opens the doorway for abuse by bad actors. The appeal of virtual currencies to criminals is their ability to transact across the globe and the low cost of resolution. Virtual currencies are also well known for being the preferred means to purchase drugs, illicit goods, and criminal services from online forums on the dark web, including places like the Silk Road and Alpha Bay. There's also anecdotal evidence of terrorist groups transferring money and attempting to raise funds using virtual currencies. Moving forward, as this technology becomes cheaper and more prevalent globally, we must be aware of the risks the abuse of the virtual currencies can pose to our financial system. Criminal groups infect computers and networks with ransomware and ask for payments in virtual currency or use online marketplaces to buy, sell, and advertise illicit goods and services. As members of Congress, we should work to remain as informed as possible about the current and emerging risks around us. And in fact, members of this subcommittee have already been active in this arena. Last week, I was happy to speak in support of the Fine Trafficking Act, a bill that would require the Government Accountability Office to study and report how virtual currencies and online marketplaces can be used for illicit means. This bill is a first step in defining the issues surrounding virtual currency exploitation, as well as creating solutions to help law enforcement and protect our citizens. I also applaud Congressman Ted Budd for introducing the Financial Technology Protection Act earlier this year, which would bring industry, insiders, and federal regulators together to find best practices and solutions to help our law enforcement solve this problem. Today's hearing is an opportunity to learn more about law enforcement's investigations and responses to the illicit use of virtual currencies. I hope our members will take this chance to learn from our witnesses about the current issues facing law enforcement in the detection of criminal activity in this area and explore what additional tools may be necessary to combat threats to the U.S. financial system. We'd also like to thank our witnesses for being here today. Look forward to your testimony. I would now recognize Mr. Foster for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. And thank you to our witnesses here. The illicit use of virtual currency is a very important topic, and under normal circumstances, I would say that it deserves our full attention. However, there are extraordinary circumstances today. Hundreds of children are sitting in cages who have been forcibly separated from their families. And so I think this is really the issue that is the more pressing to discuss. Mr. Navarro, as the highest-ranking ICE official who's being allowed to testify before Congress, we Democrats have some questions that we will be asking you. Just last month, ICE agents rounded up and incarcerated immigrants, as well as people who simply appeared to look like immigrants to them in and around my district in Illinois, without any apparent cause or reason and uncertain attention paid to adequate rules and procedures. On our southern border, ICE agents are ripping children out of their parents' arms. And we don't need a new law to put an end to this trauma. The President could very easily have put a stop to any of these policies with one phone call a week ago, or simply never have put these policies in place at all. Instead, he chose to manufacture a humanitarian crisis that was unnecessarily and easily preventable. The United States has served for a beacon of hope and freedom since its founding. We are watching that hope and freedom erode right before our eyes as thousands of these children spend another night in a metal cage. Mr. Navarro, history does not look kindly on our government when we do not uphold our commitment to human rights and basic morality. I strongly believe that the American people deserve a government that embodies the values on which it was founded. We look forward to your testimony and the answers that you will be providing to this committee. Thank you. I yield back.
Now recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Pittenger, for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Ms. Chairman and Ranking Member Promoter, for your leadership in holding this hearing today. Additionally, I'd also like to thank our distinguished panelists for lending their expertise to our subcommittee this afternoon. A special note is financial service intern and UVA student Hugo Bonilla for his exceptional research on virtual currencies. One of the greatest emerging threats to U.S. national security is the illicit use of virtual or cryptocurrencies. Domestic and international law enforcement agencies have begun taking the steps necessary to combat this new model of criminal transactions. It is our duty to provide the tools and the oversight of said tools required to maintain our edge over our adversaries. Virtual currency, due to its higher degree of anonymity, is seen as a very lucrative opportunity for those with nefarious intentions. The risk that rises from this anonymity is that criminals can use virtual currencies to store and transmit their financial gains from illegal practices such as drug dealing or human trafficking. Under the guidance of the Department of Homeland Security, the Secret Service, and the National Computer Forensics Institute, they have provided our state and local law enforcement personnel with the training necessary to investigate and combat cybercrime, including the illicit use of virtual currency. Initiatives like this must be continued and expanded by Congress to combat this emerging threat. I have hosted a dozen parliamentary intelligence security forums over the last 5 years in which delegates from 68 nations have met to address the issues such as this. The United States must continue acting as a global leader in the realm of cybersecurity. It is my hope that today we can thoroughly examine this threat to determine what additional tools and resources we need to combat it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. The chair would now recognize the gentlelady from California, Ms. Waters, for 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for scheduling today's hearing to examine the illicit uses of virtual currency and the law enforcement response. It is alarming how virtual currencies, especially newer ones, are being used to finance terrorism, launder money, and purchase drugs and weapons on the dark web. This is an important topic. However, it is not the only topic that we must discuss today. Despite the fact that the witness from the Department of Homeland Security works for U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, commonly known as ICE, and is not the agency tasked with working on the border, it would be a dereliction of duty if I did not share my concerns about the human rights abuses occurring on our border at President Trump's direction and at least find out what ICE's role is in this issue. The world has watched and listened in horror and with overwhelming sadness as children have been ripped from their parents and separated from their families. They are young, alone, and terrified without their families and made to live in literal cages. It is not clear when this child abuse will end. The White House has made every argument it can to deflect the blame for their zero-tolerance policy that led to the forcible separation of over 2,000 children from their parents in just 6 weeks. They have quoted the Bible, denied the policy, and begrudgingly acknowledged it. The president, in an attempt to convince the American public that up is down and down is up, even tried to blame Democrats for his own policy. This is Donald Trump's abhorrent policy. This is child abuse. Neither of those statements is refutable. It is time for the President, Department of Homeland Security Secretary Nielsen, and Department of Justice Attorney General Sessions to admit that their actions were not thought out and that the consequences of those actions are inhumane and completely inconsistent with the values of this country. And I'm hoping that during the period where we can raise some questions, that you will be able to help us understand what your role is. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. The chair now welcomes the testimony of our two witnesses. The third is stuck in traffic, reportedly somewhere on New York. I'm assuming that's the avenue, not the city, but we'll introduce Mr. Ott when he comes. He's representing Fenson here today. But Mr. Robert Novi is a Deputy Assistant Director of the United States Secret Service Office of Investigations with oversight of criminal investigations, operations, strategy, and policy related to cyber and financial crimes. Mr. Novi was detailed to the staff of the National Security Council at the White House as the Director for Cybersecurity Incident Response, Intelligence, and Defense Policy, and was the Deputy Assistant Director for the Congressional Affairs and the Special Agent in charge for Public Affairs. Mr. Novi has previously served as the Supervisor of the Electronic Crimes Task Force in the New York Field Office and was member of the Washington Field Office's Electronic Crimes Special Agent Program. In addition to his expertise in cybercrime, Mr. Novi served on the Presidential Protective Division during both the Clinton and Bush administrations. Prior to Secret Service career, Mr. Novi was an Assistant Branch Chief for the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, also served in the U.S. Navy. Mr. Novi received his Master's of Public Administration from Troy State University and serves on the Board of Advisors for the University of Texas at Austin. Mr. Gregory Navano is a Deputy Assistant Director in Homeland Security Investigations, Illicit Trade, Travel, and Finance Division with oversight of all financial, narcotics, document and benefit fraud, criminal gang exploitation, and several targeting and fusion centers. Previously, Mr. Navano served as the Chief of Staff to the Deputy Director of the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, as the Associate Deputy Assistant Director for the Investigative Services Division, and as the Unit Chief for the Asset Forfeiture Unit. Mr. Navano's long career also included assignments as an Assistant Special Agent in charge in the ICE Boston Field Office, a Group Supervisor of the Narcotics and Violent Gang Group, Group Supervisor of the Operational Support Group as a detailee to the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force. Mr. Navano received his Bachelor's of Science in Political Science from Boston College. We'll go ahead and introduce Mr. Ott, and we'll then just move into his testimony when he comes. But he is the Associate Director for the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, or Fenson's Enforcement Division, with oversight of the Fenson Bank Secrecy Act Compliance and Enforcement Program. Mr. Ott joined Fenson in 2014 as a Senior Advisor to the Director and was responsible for providing guidance on various matters regarding law enforcement and transnational crime. Prior to joining Fenson, Mr. Ott was a prosecutor for over 25 years with both the tax and criminal divisions of the United States Department of Justice, most recently serving for 8 years as Deputy Chief of the Organized Crime and Racketeering Section. Throughout Mr. Ott's career with the DOJ, he prosecuted and supervised prosecutions of cases involving RICO, public corruption, national security, tax evasion, financial fraud, and money laundering. Mr. Ott received his Juris Doctorate degree from the University of Baltimore School of Law. Each of you will now be recognized for 5 minutes to give an oral presentation of your testimony. Without objection, each of your written statements will be made part of the record. Mr. Navano, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Pierce, Ranking Member Perlmutter, distinguished members, and my fellow law enforcement colleagues, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the use of virtual currency and the efforts of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement to target, investigate those who exploit virtual currency to carry out nefarious activity. ICE's Homeland Security Investigations has long stood at the forefront of combating transnational criminal activity that seeks to exploit our trade, travel, and financial systems for illicit purposes. HSI is the largest investigative agency within the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, with more than 6,000 special agents assigned to more than 200 domestic offices and 67 international offices in 50 countries. HSI has the authority to enforce more than 400 U.S. federal statutes to include financial crimes and the use of virtual currency. Virtual currency is not a new phenomenon. Virtual currency in the form of airline mileage reward programs have been in existence since the early 1980s. The challenge for law enforcement, however, began in 2009 when Bitcoin was introduced as the first decentralized virtual currency. With its introduction An entirely new world was created in relation to money laundering and financial investigations. Following its introduction, Bitcoin quickly became the currency of choice on the darknet, as buyers and sellers enjoyed the pseudo-anonymity it provided. The good news for law enforcement, however, is that despite the pseudo-anonymity exploited by the users of Bitcoin and other virtual currencies, as well as their ease to transfer at some point, criminals need to convert their cash into virtual currency or their virtual currency into cash. Whenever monetary exchanges are made, a choke point is created. This is the time when criminals are most vulnerable and can be identified by law enforcement means and methods. Utilizing the traditional investigative methods coupled with financial and blockchain analysis, HSI is able to disrupt and dismantle the criminals and the TCOs utilizing virtual currencies. Legitimate users of virtual currencies are more than willing to conduct business with a legitimate virtual currency exchange. Legitimate exchanges are registered with the U.S. Department of Treasury's Finance Crimes Enforcement Network, also known as FinCEN. FinCEN issued guidance in 2013 identifying persons or companies involved in the exchange of virtual currency as money service businesses, requiring them to follow regulatory and reporting protocols. Those who use virtual currency for illegal purposes, however, more often than not stay away from registered exchanges in an attempt to conceal their own identities. Instead, these criminals look to illicit or unregistered peer-to-peer exchanges that don't require or ask for personal identifying information. They illegally generate revenue by charging a premium for allowing their customers to remain anonymous. They will sell cryptocurrencies above market value and buy below market value from those customers who wish to remain anonymous. As part of a commitment to combating the opioid crisis in the United States, HSI has engaged in a multi-year effort to increase its cyber-enabled workforce by training employees to conduct online investigations. Additionally, HSI has conducted virtual currency and darknet training for federal, state, local, tribal, and international partners. In fiscal year 2018, HSI has conducted more than 50 outreach and training sessions, both nationally and internationally, reaching over 4,000 law enforcement partners. HSI not only collaborates with fellow law enforcement agencies, we also understand the importance of partnering with the private industry. We expanded the focus of Operation Cornerstone, which was created in 2003, with a primary focus and goal of detecting and closing vulnerabilities within the U.S. financial, trade, and transportation sectors. With the rapid growth of virtual currency and with the expansion of private companies involved in virtual currency, HSI has expanded Operation Cornerstone to include private industry involved in the virtual currency space. HSI's increased commitment to conducting virtual currency investigations has steadily increased, as evidenced by our increase in training and collaboration. In fiscal year 2011, HSI initiated only one investigation of virtual currency. However, by 2017, we initiated 203. As of May of 2018, HSI has already initiated 144 virtual currency investigations. With the increase in our investigations, HSI has also seen a large increase in our seizures. For example, in FY14, HSI seized $150,000 in virtual currency. However, by the end of fiscal year 17, we seized nearly $7 million in virtual currency. And right now, in this fiscal year, through April of 18, HSI has already seized more than $25 million in virtual currency. Technology will inevitably continue to evolve, and law enforcement agencies everywhere must continue to adapt and evolve as well. HSI will continue to partner with all law enforcement agencies along with cutting-edge technology partners. In closing, I appreciate your interest in the burgeoning field of virtual currency, and thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you today. I look forward to answering any of your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Novi, you are recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Pierce, Ranking Member Perlmutter, members of the subcommittee, thank you for allowing me to testify today. The challenge of the illicit use of digital currency spans across sectors of industry and areas of criminal law. As such, the response necessarily requires a whole-of-government approach. That is why I am so pleased to be here today with two of our partners from FinCEN and ICE. I would like to commend them for their important work and for continuing their productive partnership with us at the United States Secret Service. At its most basic level, the challenge of digital currencies mirrored those challenges faced by the broader financial system. The key to success in countering crime is to identify the beneficiary of the crime. So that's why we follow the money. This rule has held true for thousands of years and continues for crimes in cyberspace and crimes involving digital currencies. As one of the nation's original investigative agencies, the United States Secret Service has for over 150 years conducted criminal investigations to protect the American public, financial institutions, and critical infrastructure from criminal exploitation. In 1982, the Secretary of Treasury directed us to investigate crimes related to electronic funds transfer. 2 years later, in 1984, the Congress passed legislation to expand the Secret Service's responsibilities to include investigating a range of computer hacking and access device violations. And today, we have extensive authorities to safeguard financial and payment systems from criminal exploitation, especially from those enabled by the internet. To perform our mission, the United States Secret Service has long kept pace with new technologies used by the financial sector. Accordingly, over the past 30 years, we have successfully investigated and arrested some of the world's most significant and most sophisticated cyber criminals. Today, with respect to digital currencies, our primary focus is around three core areas. Number one, criminal schemes that undermine the integrity of the financial systems. Number two, money laundering. And number three, fraud schemes that include computer access device, identity theft, and other forms of fraud. Over the past decade, working with our law enforcement partners here and around the world, we have investigated and shut down two major centralized digital currencies, both of which supported extensive criminal activity: eGold in 2007 and Liberty Reserve in 2013. The Secret Service continues to work on a range of investigations involving digital currencies. A few of these cases are referenced in my written testimony. Let me stress, there are real and legitimate commercial applications for digital currencies. That said, in recent years, some digital currencies have been widely adopted for illicit purposes. For example, eGold and Liberty Reserve, two centralized digital currencies, were used, A, to purchase illicit goods and services, such as drugs, credit card information, personally identifiable information, child pornography, and a range of criminal services, and B, to launder illicit proceeds, particularly as a means of facilitating overseas money transfers. More recently, the growing use of decentralized digital currencies such as Bitcoin has enabled additional criminal activities. These include cryptojacking, which is the use of malware or compromised websites to hijack the computing power of others to obtain cryptocurrencies through mining. The theft of crypto assets directly, generally by targeting the private encryption keys of users. Ransomware, in which digital currencies are demanded as part of an extortion scheme, and attacks on the blockchain networks themselves. As these decentralized currencies proliferate and evolve, new risks are emerging. Criminals are increasingly leveraging anonymity-enhanced currencies and services, such as cryptocurrency tumblers and mixers, to obscure transactions on the blockchain. In order to counter all these diverse illicit activities, effective law enforcement requires robust cooperation, both domestically and internationally between law enforcement and regulatory agencies, as well as thoughtful partnerships with industry. Consequently, the Secret Service remains squarely focused on hiring, developing, and retaining a skilled and experienced investigative workforce. We are committed to working with partners across the law enforcement community to jointly train and develop shared technical solutions. The constant development of investigative capabilities is how we maintain our ability to effectively respond to innovations of technology now and into the future. Lastly, continued attention is needed to ensure that law enforcement agencies maintain lawful access to critical sources of evidence, regardless of where or in what form that information is stored. In closing, let me speak directly to those who seek to further the illicit activities through the use of digital currencies. As the investigative work of the United States Secret Service and our law enforcement partners continues to demonstrate, we are relentless in enforcing the law, and we will not be stopped by the perceived anonymity of digital currencies or the broader internet. Thank you again for your opportunity to testify, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Mr. Ott, we have introduced you previously and recognize that your just-in-time manufacturing has walked in just in time. If you are settled, we will recognize you for 5 minutes.
Chairman Pierce, Ranking Member Perlmutter, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for inviting me to speak today on behalf of the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, commonly known as FinCEN. FinCEN has a leading role in the regulation of virtual currency activity and supports law enforcement investigations involving virtual currency and related financial crimes. So I appreciate the opportunity to discuss our work in this space and the national security implications and illicit finance risks presented by virtual currency. FinCEN also works to combat the threats presented by both traditional and emerging payment systems while promoting responsible technological innovation throughout the financial sector. In 2011, FinCEN issued a regulation that defined money transmissions services as the acceptance and transmission of currency, funds, and other value that substitutes for currency by any means. The 2011 rule serves as the foundation of our regulation of certain virtual currency activity. In March 2013, FinCEN issued guidance to clarify that virtual currency exchangers and administrators generally qualify as money transmitters under the Bank Secrecy Act. Virtual currency payments pose illicit financing risks that necessitate careful assessment and mitigation. In particular, we are concerned about the growing use of decentralized convertible virtual currency to facilitate cybercrime, fraud, extortion, drug trafficking, money laundering, and other transnational crimes. FinCEN estimates that at least $4 billion in virtual currency has moved through the darknet marketplaces since 2011. While traditional financial methods remain the primary vehicle for illicit activity, FinCEN believes virtual currency presents specific illicit finance risks, and that without vigilance and targeted action, the scale of this activity could grow. FinCEN has increasingly prioritized identifying, tracing, and disrupting the flow of illicit virtual currency activity. To that end, FinCEN examines financial institutions for compliance with their regulatory obligations to prevent money laundering and terrorist financing. In 2014, FinCEN, together with its delegated examiners at the IRS, have conducted examinations at more than 1/3 of all registered virtual currency money transmitters in the United States. FinCEN has also taken significant enforcement actions. In July 2017, acting in coordination with our law enforcement partners, FinCEN assessed a penalty of over $110 million against BTCE, an internet-based, foreign-located money transmitter, for various BSA violations. As part of this action, FinCEN also assessed a $12 million penalty against one of BTC's operators, the highest penalty we have ever assessed against an individual. Collaboration is critical to combat the growing threats presented by virtual currency. Just last month, I met with my enforcement counterparts at the CFTC and the SEC. My staff and others at FinCEN carefully and closely coordinate with these agencies on an ongoing basis. One area where we continue to work together is on the illicit finance risks surrounding the recent growth of initial coin offerings, or ICOs. While ICO arrangements vary, and depending on their structure may be subject to different authorities, one fact remains clear. FinCEN, along with our partners at the SEC and CFTC, expect businesses involved in ICOs to meet all of their AML CFT obligations. As both a former police officer and a former federal prosecutor, I also want to highlight the important collaborations FinCEN has with our partners in law enforcement. FinCEN has provided support in over 100 cases since 2016. FinCEN's experts trace different types of virtual currency activities, identify suspicious sources of funds, target unregistered MSBs that do business in whole or in substantial part within the United States, and help disrupt transnational criminal networks operating in virtual currency. Foremost among our challenges in combating this activity is the lack of consistent AML CFT regulations and supervision of virtual currency activity in most jurisdictions around the world. FinCEN and other Treasury components are working with the Financial Action Task Force, or FATF, and the Egmont Group to engage key jurisdictions directly to address these vulnerabilities. FinCEN looks forward to working with the committee, with law enforcement partners, the public sector, and our regulatory partners to identify strategies to help the United States remain both a global hub for innovation and a safe and secure financial system. Thank you again for having me here today. I'm happy to answer any of the questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Hutt. Now I'll recognize myself for 5 minutes for questions. So I guess, Mr. Nova, you quote in page 4 of your document about the different cryptocurrencies, the different exchanges that exist. How do you, many times these are very dark. How do you go about establishing those? How easy is it to find out about them?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in the Secret Service, when we conduct our investigations, we target any and all technologies or currencies that can be used for illicit activity. And so therefore, digital currencies or virtual currencies are one of those types of technologies or means of transacting. So what we do is, in our undercover operations or through our operations and our criminal investigations, we investigate and look for different currencies, different transactions, different ways that crimes are committed, and then we look to see how they're doing it. We also do that through criminal informants. Criminal informants introduce us to those different areas as well. And so that's how we learn these things.
I guess my question is, do you know what you don't know? Do you know how many currencies are out there that have not yet surfaced? Do you have a good feeling for that? And how do you go about identifying them?
Right, that's a very good question, Mr. Chairman. The answer is we have an understanding that there's a lot of digital currencies out there. We don't know every single one of them. Digital currency, we understand a majority of the major ones, but currencies and coins can be created through technology, and so we don't know every single one of them. But through our partners of our electronic crimes task forces, which are both our members of academia, of the private sector, as well as other law enforcement, we collaborate together to learn and teach each other what each of us learns, and that's how we keep up with it. But the answer is, sir, I couldn't tell you how many digital currencies or virtual currencies are out there, but as they come up and they're used by criminals.
Sure. You also quote fairly significant numbers of transactions. And are you pretty comfortable that those are accurate? Mr. Ott, let me ask you that, because I think, don't you all have an intersection of responsibility right here at this point? Aren't you both kind of looking at the same issues?
Yes, Chairman. We have, through our intelligence division, we regularly track the incoming BSA filings, analyze those based on our business rules, and be able to analyze that, put together a piece that would disseminate that to law enforcement.
But you're pretty comfortable that you know what's going on?
We feel that the financial institutions are a very great partner and the best resource for that type of information. Yes, sir.
I guess one of my deeper concerns is, well, let me switch over to a different question. Not all the transactions are illicit with the digital currencies, is that correct?
That's correct. We were not
And so if digital currencies are used for legitimate transactions, how does say the IRS identify tax liabilities for legitimate operations if you have a digital currency?
Well, again, that would be, I'm not familiar with the IRS procedures as it responds to virtual currency. FinCEN focuses on money transmissions. I know that we certainly work very closely with all law enforcement agencies as well as the other regulators.
Yeah, if I could interrupt, I'm sort of running out of time here. I kind of want to drill down on this a bit. If any of you have an idea, because this to me is one of the biggest exposures that we have, is legitimate goods and services being bought by very difficult to track transaction methods. And at some point you undermine the entire stability of society, because society does work with its safety nets, with government spending off of taxation. And if that becomes more difficult to pursue, if it's more difficult to identify what those transactions are, then I'm just wondering, is anybody thinking about this aspect? Maybe right now the digital currencies are not that prevalent, but in a matter of time they will be, unless we kind of understand what we're dealing with. So somebody want to wrap up in a 30-second answer here?
Chairman, I'll take that question. It's my understanding that the IRS treats virtual currency as property, and therefore the sale of virtual currency actually is subject to capital gains tax. So
okay, but that's assuming they can see it, and all of you are talking in your testimony about many of them are invisible, and so how are they going to identify? How are they going to identify it as a property if it's not visible? That's my question. I'll leave it dangling in the air here. We'll go to Mr. Foster now for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Deputy Assistant Director Devano, are you aware of any higher-ranking ICE officials who will be testifying before Congress who might address the crisis being caused by this administration's policies of children being deliberately separated from their parents?
Congressman, at this time, I am not aware of any.
So you are all we have. Okay. Now, first on the issue of family separation, I understand the administration has announced plans to expand its capacity for holding children who have been separated from their parents in facilities sometimes known as baby jails. And I was wondering if you can give this committee any further information about what this expanded capacity will look like. Specifically, will ICE be constructing more cages to separate children from their parents? Will this expanded capacity be in the same location as the children's parents where they're being held or elsewhere? And what sort of child care training the personnel running these facilities are being given? And are the background checks for these personnel up to the standards that we expect for child care in the United States?
Chairman, thank you for your, Congressman, thank you for your question. I'm here to testify today regarding virtual currency. I work for the director within the Department of Homeland Security. That's Homeland Security Investigations. And our mission is basically to combat transnational criminal organizations that seek to basically exploit our immigration and customs laws. I do not work for the director within the Department of Homeland Security that handles the matters that you have addressed. I'd be happy to take your questions back and have someone appropriately answer those questions, but that would not be me sitting in my position with Homeland Security Investigations.
Yeah, so I will be submitting those for the record and look forward to your responses on them, because this is just a crucial issue. Now, more locally in my district, ICE in the last month or so has executed a number of raids. ICE conducted a 6-day enforcement action in and around my district. I was told from advocates on the ground, which were later confirmed by the Chicago Tribune and others, that ICE agents pulled over and detained one Victor Cortez, a Mexican national who was here legally visiting a friend in Joliet, Illinois, in my district. Mr. Cortez was in the country legally with a valid visa. Mr. Cortez produced this visa for ICE agents, and yet, despite this, he was still detained for several hours. And so my first question is it a common practice for ICE to pull over and detain anyone simply because they look Hispanic or speaks with an accent?
Again, Congressman, I appreciate your concerns and your questions. I'm not familiar with the situation that you're describing. Again, I work for the Homeland Security Investigations Directorate, and that does not sound like something that HSI would have been involved in. Happy to take the questions back for the record and provide you the answers that you require, sir.
Okay. So, you know, this issue of pulling people over where they actually there is no legal, you know, they're here legally and are being pulled over. It's a little bit personal to me. My wife is an immigrant from Korea, here obviously legally. Can she expect also to be pulled over because someone thinks that she doesn't look like an American?
Again, Congressman, I'm not familiar with the situation. I will tell you that all HSI agents go through specific training, are trained to not to profile and to conduct targeted law enforcement investigations. Again, the specific circumstances you're talking about, I'm not prepared to testify here today with those circumstances, but I would be happy to take those questions back and provide you a response.
Yeah, I would be interested specifically on the profiling of Mr. Cortez. Is it a common practice for ICE to impersonate police officers and conduct traffic stops, or is that part of your training as standard operating procedure?
Well, ICE deportation officers as well as special agents are considered, in our view, police officers. We are law enforcement officers. But to deal with the specific, questions that you're talking about, I don't know the specifics, so it's hard for me to provide you an answer without knowing those specifics. Again, happy to take those questions back and respond appropriately, once those questions are submitted for the record.
Thank you, and I also think all of Congress looks forward to your superiors having the courage to appear before Congress to answer for the outrage that's happening on our southern border. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back, and the chair would now recognize the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Pittenger, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, thank each of you for your statements today and your insights into these critical issues. I would ask you, in these illicit cases that you've identified, are the perpetrators that you've previously flagged, are they suspicious? Are they regarded as being engaged in other activities outside of cryptocurrency? Are they? Is this a traditional group of people, the same plot of actors, or is this a new breed?
Congressman, I could take that. So, majority of the cyber criminals that we go after, a majority of them are using some type of virtual currency to move their money, to launder their money, to either make sales or purchases of illicit items, or to further their crimes. We're actually going after the criminals, and then as we're going after the criminals, we come across the ways that they're moving money and the ways that they're laundering money. And so, as Secret Service agents, we're financial crimes investigators, as we have been since 1865. And so, like I said in my testimony, we follow the money. And
yes, sir. So these are the traditional criminals that have been involved in previous criminality.
They could be, but the thing is, sir, they're pretty sophisticated these days. These days, the cyber criminals of today are a little bit different than the bank robbers of yesterday, but they're still doing the same thing, trying to steal the money.
Yes, sir. There's also evidence suggesting that cryptocurrencies are increasingly used in money laundering schemes by organized criminal groups. Does U.S. law enforcement see any trends in the use of cryptocurrencies for money laundering related to drug traffickers, human traffickers, or trade-based money laundering?
As my colleague from the Secret Service stated, we investigate all crimes in the dark net. So yes, we would be concerned with drug traffickers, human traffickers, all individuals who are involved in nefarious activity. I think the goal of using these cryptocurrencies is the anonymity that they believe it provides. So we in law enforcement obviously face challenges at times to determine who they are. Some of these individuals still use traditional means, such as third-party money laundering, trade-based money laundering, but those who want to be pseudo-anonymous actually, use these decentralized cryptocurrencies to conduct their businesses on the darknet.
Do we have any estimates in terms of percentage, the amount of these crimes that are conducted, cyber or otherwise, that with just the illicit use of cryptocurrencies? How much of a factor is it?
I can't, Congressman, I can't come up with an exact percentage right now, but I can tell you that a good majority of the crimes that the Secret Service investigates, virtual currencies are used in those transactions, primarily because when they're transacting online in the dark web or using criminal forums, that's how they can easily move money without having to talk to each other or communicate, but it also uses anonymity.
Do you have the legal latitude to perform your duties? Are there any legislative interests that you have that would give you greater capability to be successful in your duties in stopping illicit finance?
Well, for the Secret Service, sir, I think I'm not comfortable with the Secret Service suggesting that, but I will tell you that as technology increases, we use the laws and the authorities that we have today. But with that being said, we always have to look to see what's going to be the next crime, where's going to be the next step. And so we would say that we're always looking to make sure that laws and statutes are always kept up to date so that we can maintain and keep active what we can get.
Is there anything that you see now? Are there any impediments now legally that impede your ability to perform?
I would say currently I would say the Cloud Act was a very good step in moving forward and for us to be able to get access to evidence, digital evidence, and such that area. I would say as we use that and as we move forward, I would look to make sure that we still maintain access to lawful access to digital evidence that we can get from when we serve subpoenas and court orders.
Yes, sir. Anybody else want to comment on that point? Well, my last question would be related to just, do you believe that there are additional factors that would limit terrorist exploitation of virtual currencies? And how could they impact the domestic or international counterterrorism community focus on this front?
I think if we stated, all transnational criminal organizations, people involved in nefarious activities, there is obviously a desire to be anonymous, and the use of cryptocurrencies would be one. So I think it's definitely a possibility that we all need to be concerned about.
Yes, sir. Thank you. My time's expired.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair would now recognize the ranking member of the full committee, Ms. Waters, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Mr. Navarro, I know that you're here to testify about the illicit use of virtual currency, but that's only one aspect of your job as I see it. You are the Deputy Assistant Director, responsible for illicit trade, travel, and finance division, Homeland Security investigations, and U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, can you tell me what you do with that aspect of your job that's described as U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement?
So I work for the Department of Homeland Security, which Immigration and Customs Enforcement is a directorate under the Department of Homeland Security. Within Immigration and Customs Enforcement, there are several components. Homeland Security investigations being one, enforcement removal operations being another. I do not work for enforcement removal operations. I work for the criminal investigation side, which is Homeland Security investigations.
Are you familiar with zero tolerance policy of the agency?
Yes, I have heard of it. I know it's all over the news.
Well,
So
I need you to help me understand a few things. If a mother and child or children go to what is known as the port of entry to claim amnesty, do you have anything to do with that at all? Or your department under Immigration and Customs Enforcement have anything to do with that aspect of the agency?
So if an individual shows up at a port of entry and claims asylum, they'd be dealt with by our Customs and Border Patrol, which is basically under the Department of Homeland Security. How my directorate would be involved in individuals who are claiming asylum is more from the fraud standpoint. If there was facilitators who are actually organizing frivolous claims of asylum here in the United States, then it would be my directorate that would actually look into those frivolous claims. But we are not the front line who are dealing with these individuals when they come across the border.
So explain to me how it works. So a mother and children show up at the port of entry claiming amnesty, and as I understand zero tolerance policy, they are not facilitated in the way that we thought the law works. They could be subject to detention at that point. What happens to the child at that point?
Again, Congressman, I'm not familiar with the current practices along the border because I do not work for that directorate, so I cannot comment, but I'd be happy to take those questions back for the record.
You are the Deputy Assistant Director, and U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement is part of your responsibility or oversight. Do you supervise anybody in that division?
So again, I do work for Immigration and Customs Enforcement, but specifically for Homeland Security investigations, and we do not have people on the front line who are making those determinations of admissibility when an individual enters the United States.
What and how do you investigate someone who's claiming amnesty, who is thought not to be eligible for amnesty? What happens to them at that point?
We don't investigate every single person who claims
But
asylum
the ones
here in
that
the
you do
United States.
investigate, what happens? How do you do that?
We are looking more to the facilitators, the organizations who are exploiting these individuals who are claiming asylum, taking their money, filing frivolous claims. That is more what Homeland Security Investigations does. We are not looking at every single person
Okay, I
who
know
files an
that you may
application.
not be looking at every single individual, but those that you do look at, maybe it's a mother with children who you think may be part of a ring where they're trying to get folks into the United States at the port of entry. You have to investigate them. You don't investigate all of them, but when you do, how does it work? What do you do from that point? And if you want to continue the investigation because you're suspicious, you have enough information that would lead you to believe that something is going on, what happens to the child? Who has the responsibility for taking the child if you're going to retain the woman or the family? What happens at that point?
Again, Congressman, I do not deal with the detention of individuals. Those decisions are made by another directorate. We are on the back end. We are investigating when people have already made an entry into the United States. They may have a hearing before an immigration judge here in the United States. We're not involved in that.
So you are not involved in the supervision of that aspect of your job at all, is that right?
That is correct.
Thank you very much. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. The chair now recognizes the main man from Maine, Mr. Poliquin, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here very much. I appreciate it. You folks deal with criminal activity at the federal level or from the federal standpoint. And you have a lot of tools available to you that we don't have up in Bangor, Maine, or Lewiston, Maine, both of which I represent. I represent the rural part of Maine, and Bangor and Lewiston are part of my district. Tell me a little bit about the type of training that you folks might extend to law enforcement officials on the ground at the local level in our great state and other parts of our country. Mr. Navarro, who wants to take a shot at that?
I'll take that one.
Yep.
So the Secret Service, we actually have partnered with the state of Alabama, and we have the National Computer Forensics Institute in Hoover,
Right.
Alabama. Fantastic operation, fantastic organization. And what we do there is we train solely state and local law enforcement, prosecutors, and judges. The Secret Service, we focus on the law enforcement portion of it, while the state of Alabama District Attorneys Association focuses on the prosecutors and judges. And what we do is we take the same level of training that we give our Secret Service agents, and we provide that to state and locals, especially for someone like your folks in Maine, upstate, downstate, wherever you're going to go. The idea is we're looking to train the cyber supply chain, if you want to call it, all the way from law enforcement all the way up to judges, so that they completely understand. But we don't leave them alone. The main thing is after they get their training, they actually leave with the equipment that they're trained on, because many times they can't afford a digital forensic lab of their own. So when they leave there, whatever equipment they're trained on, they actually get that equipment, they take it back to their police department and use that at their police department to work on any investigation. It doesn't have to be a cyber crime. It could be a rape, it could be a murder, it could be a bank robbery, it could be any type of crime. The main thing, though, is when it deals with cyber is really difficult technology, and sometimes it takes a little bit more. And so we don't leave people hanging out there as well. What we do is we connect them to our electronic crimes task forces. By doing that, let's say an officer in Maine has a hard time trying to figure out a forensic tool or something along those lines. We'll work with them through our electronic crimes task force, primarily in Boston, but we'll actually send agents up to Maine if we need to help them understand or work on whatever they need to work on.
My primary constitutional responsibility, Mr. Novi, is to protect our families. And there's no one who's more pro-jobs, pro-business, pro-national security, pro-protecting our families than I am. And so I really appreciate you giving me that information, because it's all hands on deck. We have to make sure that the folks at the local level who are the front line, that thin blue line, have the tools they need to do all of this work. And this whole cryptocurrency and everything else is new to a lot of folks and very, very complicated. Let me morph in a little bit, and maybe, Mr. Navarro, this would be for you, but if not, someone else jump in. Ransomware, where bad actors are able to put a virus or something else on your system, whether it be personally or at a business, and it effectively contact you and say, unless you pay us X amount of money, we're going to let this virus run rampant and destroy your system and interrupt your workflow, which could kill jobs and so forth and so on. What about the use of cryptocurrency to pay that ransomware, that ransom, if you will, to remove that problem from your network? Do you folks run into that, and how in the heck do you fight that, and how do our folks at the local level fight that?
Actually, I'll take that one as well, Congressman.
Thank you.
So ransomware actually, we believe, in the Secret Service has proliferated from the use of digital currencies, because it's used in just about every payment that you can imagine for ransomware. And because the anonymity and the quickness that you can make a transaction, that's why people use virtual currencies for ransomware. The tough thing about ransomware is it does take preparation. People should take into consideration basic cybersecurity and basic cyber practices. People should have backups to their systems. In the Secret Service, we've actually gone out and done a whole bunch of workshops all around the nation with us as well as with the Financial Services Information Sharing Analysis Center as well as the FBI, where we've gone and we've taught different courses and classes on how to defeat or how to get prepared for ransomware. But to answer your question, virtual currency has actually been the propagator for ransomware, we believe.
If I call Bill O'Malley, who's the chief of police in Bangor, or Phil Kroll, who's the chief of police in Auburn, Maine, would they know who to call at your shop to get help for any of these issues? Are you folks pretty good as far as outreach to our local folks on the ground?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have an office in Portland, Maine, and that office in Portland, Maine is actually there to go in liaison with all the law enforcement agencies, no matter how big or small they are in your state.
Great. Thank you all. Yes, sir.
I'm familiar with your AOR being from New England, and I know that we have multiple task forces. We have an office in Portland, Maine, Bangor, Maine, as well as Holton, Maine. And I know that we have several task forces in those areas where we work every day and collaborate with state and local law enforcement officers in your district.
Great. Well, thank you very much. And I do want to ask one last question.
Time has expired.
How do you divide your loyalties between the Red Sox and the Nationals if you're from New England? It's not easy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back my time. The witness does not have to answer that question.
It was not the lapse of time that was your problem at the last statement. Thank you. Would now recognize the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Maloney, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I thank the chairman for yielding. Mr. Navarro, first of all, I'd like to thank all of the panelists for being here. But Mr. Navarro, I'm sure you're aware of what is happening at our southern border. Children, including babies, are being ripped out of their parents' arms, and these people were just merely looking for a better life for their families here in the United States. It is nothing short of government-sanctioned child abuse and runs counter to everything that we stand for as a nation. I've seen photos of children in cages, heard recordings of children crying, and spoken with fathers at a detention center this past weekend in New Jersey, where they came legally seeking asylum and were put into detention prisons. And one father said at 3 o'clock in the morning, they came and tore his daughter from his arms. And just last night, the Associated Press reported that babies and toddlers are being shipped literally hundreds of miles away from their parents to be housed in so-called tender age facilities. Make no mistake, I don't care what they're called, these are prisons for babies. And has this administration no soul? Have they no basic human empathy? This is not governance. This is not enforcing existing law. This is law that was made up by this administration. And it is stone cold evil and is entirely the choice of this administration and a reflection of a heartless ideology. So my question, Mr. Navarro, is that surely many ICE agents are mothers and fathers in addition to their role with the agency. Is there any concern among your colleagues about the irreparable damage this policy of separation will have on these children?
Congressman, thank you for your question. Again, working for Homeland Security Investigations, we're not involved in that aspect of what you're speaking about. I am a parent, and of course, I understand exactly what you're saying. I've been doing this job for 27 years. I'm a law enforcement officer, and I certainly understand what you're saying. But I'm not here to comment on that because I'm here to testify on virtual currency and be happy to take any specific questions you have back for the record.
Well, this administration has deliberately chosen this path, and would you agree that the administration has the authority to change this policy? Well, now I know you're not going to answer, but I do believe they could change it. But before I close, I would like to play a very troubling recording that has been widely circulated in the news this week.
¿De dónde son ustedes? ¿Y tú? Guatemala. No llores. Con mi tía por lo menos para que después llegue mi mami. ¿Me puedes abrir alguien cerró la puerta esa? No, que me venga a traer mi tía para llevarme.
Well, I just want to close by saying, as the mother of 2 children, I find this, this policy absolutely unconscionable. I cannot imagine like to have your children torn from your arms. And these are people that are just seeking a better life for their families. They're coming here seeking asylum. We've always been a beacon of hope to the world. And persecuting and separating children from their families is just un-American and just plain wrong. And it's an outrageous policy. It needs to end. And we need to make sure the administration absolutely never does it again. I thank you very much, and I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. The chair would now recognize the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Davidson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses. I appreciate your expertise on financial crimes enforcement, illicit finance, and particularly related to cryptocurrencies today. Hopefully we can stay on topic. During my 5 minutes, I'll try to stay focused on the topic at hand because it's hard to get these hearings scheduled, so thank you. We can't change course on hearings all the time because of the news of the day. Pressing as it is, I trust that we are on a path to better policy in all sorts of arenas, including this one which we're here to work on. So the past several years, I've been watching the growth of digital assets and cryptocurrencies, and I'm excited about the opportunities they create. And I am curious, just in terms of framing this issue, it's very important that your tools in your kit bag stay in compliance with current laws. And we have illicit finance denominated in U.S. dollars, correct? Correct? Anyone yet?
Congressman, it can be denominated in a number of things. The cost for or the value of a digital currency.
No, I'm not talking about cryptocurrencies. I'm just cash in bags, duffel bags of cash, hay bales full of cash, you know, ship containers full of cash, rail cars full of cash, suitcases full of cash. We transact in cash, right? There's also illicit finance in Hawala networks, right? These things aren't illegal. We're looking for ways to be able to, you know, U.S. dollars aren't illegal. Carrying cash in a satchel is not illegal, though we've set tripwires in place like crossing a border with too much cash without reporting that you're crossing a border with too much cash. These are the things that help you catch that. Still struggling, last I heard, about Hawala networks and things like that. Though operating a Hawala network isn't illegal, operating one to do illicit things is. And I guess, how do we apply those sort of kit bag things to cryptocurrencies so that we protect the use of cryptocurrencies, yet have the tripwires that help us detect illegal activity with the cryptocurrencies?
So when we conduct our investigations, as you're mentioning, all tools in our tool bag are used, whether it's traditional schemes to attack money laundering, which would be, as you're mentioning, bulk cash smuggling, third-party money laundering, trade-based money laundering. We also, as my colleague from Secret Service mentioned, use of confidential informants, use of undercover operations, whatever we can do to basically detect, disrupt, and dismantle those organizations, whether they're using the traditional methods that you're speaking about, the cryptocurrencies, we are trained to actually attack the problem as it exists.
In general, once something moves across an electronic format, is it easier to have record keeping on that than, say, Hawala or cash, even cryptocurrencies? There's a record, right? A searchable record or a queryable record.
So Congressman, so the answer is usually yes. Usually, when it creates a record and there's an electronic record that can be followed. However, in virtual currencies, sometimes it can be obscured through tumblers or mixers or something along those lines as well. So there is a record, and you can find it, but sometimes it's a little bit harder to find.
Okay, and so additional guidance has been given to provide compliance as money service businesses for people that are doing these transactions in the U.S. We have places that don't comply with those laws. just like we have it for people who don't comply with it for wires and other ways that we do it with cash. I'm concerned about, in the states we have all sorts of regs that are duplicative. Wyoming has some laws related to crypto, but so does New York. I'm not sure why New York needs such a heavy-handed AML provision. Do you view the duplication as counterproductive? Would it be easier to have a uniform reg across the country, or is it easier to have state-based systems as well?
Well, Congressman, for FinCEN's perspective, of course, we're on the federal level, but we recognize that, we work very closely with some of our state regulators as well. They adopt many of the similar provisions as are found in the Bank Secrecy Act. And what we find in terms of the biggest challenge that we have in regulating virtual currency is, in fact, an inconsistent or lack of consistent AML, CFT regulations internationally that open up vulnerabilities within the United States. And I believe, while we're working with our foreign counterparts to try to correct that situation, we feel that there will still be a vulnerability until we have that international cooperation.
Thank you. My time has expired.
The gentleman's time is expired. The chair would now recognize Mr. Vargas for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity. Again, I want to thank the 3 witnesses here today. I especially want to thank them for your diligent work against the illicit use of cryptocurrency, especially in sex trafficking and drug trafficking. Again, thank you very much. I do, however, want to ask some questions to Mr. Navarro. I'm taking a look here at the information that you sent to us, and it does say U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement right at the top. And I think when you were introduced, we heard that you had more experience than your present job. Could you repeat again what your career has been long? It's been 27 years in law enforcement. We appreciate that. What other experiences, what other jobs did you have with ICE?
Congressman, I started my career as an immigration inspector. That's where I started my career. I became a special agent, worked my way up to be a group supervisor, assistant special agent in charge. As you're probably aware, in 2003, Immigration and Naturalization Service and Customs actually emerged to form Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Homeland Security Investigations. Since my time in headquarters, I've worked as a unit chief in asset forfeiture. I was the chief of staff for the deputy director of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and I was also, now in my position, I am the deputy assistant director for illicit trade, travel, and finance.
So you do have quite a bit of experience beyond simply working in the position that you have today. I think some of the questions that we were asking of you are questions maybe that you do have some experience on. I do want to ask some myself. Are you familiar with the family case management program?
I have heard of it, sir. I know it's part of the enforcement removal operations portfolio. I'm not intimately, though, knowledgeable about it.
It had an almost 100% court appearance rate. So this is where the families were not separated. Instead, they were able to stay together, and then they had to come back for court appearances. It almost had a 100% rate of people coming back for their court appearance. It was very, very successful. They did this for families that weren't flight risks and they weren't dangerous. And it was quite successful. I don't know why we stopped it. That's one of the reasons why there has to be this separation of families. The President says there does not have to be one. In fact, Presidents claim that DHS is required to separate families under current law. That I don't understand. Maybe you could explain that to me. Contrary to claims by the Attorney General, the Bible in Romans 13, which I know well, I studied to be a priest for a number of years, it's not statutory authority. It doesn't justify this horrific and unconscionable policy. But can you point to any statutory authority mandating that families be separated? Because I can point you to the family case management program that didn't do this, didn't separate the families.
I am not familiar with any statutes that require that, Congressman.
Okay, I can tell you this, and I think you would agree with this. I represent the border in California, and I do go and visit not only with ICE, but CBP and BP, Border Patrol. I can tell you this, what they're doing today, your agents, they're bringing diapers that they're paying for themselves, milk for kids, other things that these children need because they know they're going to be separated, and they think, because like you, their parents, they think they need these things. If you ask your own agents out there, they'll tell you they do not like what they're doing. They're not happy about it. They're spending their own money trying to help these kids. Are you familiar with any of that?
Congressman, again, I think you're speaking about Border Patrol agents.
No, I'm also speaking about the CBP, and I'm also speaking about ICE.
CBP is not under my directorate. So again, our special agents, more than likely, unless they're investigating some type of transnational criminal organization entering the border, would not be involved in some of the circumstances you're speaking about.
But I think you're being very technical because you do have experience within all of the range there. As you described to me earlier, you were in fact a line officer. You didn't in fact have that. So what I would tell you is this: this policy that you have now, I wish you would go back and look at those and talk to your agents on the ground. They don't like it. They know it's not their values. When you go and you see, like I had the opportunity to see on Monday, these children that just want their moms. They just want their dads. What we're doing is wrong. It's certainly not based in Christianity or any type of religion that I'm aware of, and it has to be reversed. Your own agents, if you talk to them, they'll tell you, and you can go there and see the diapers that they buy, the food that they buy for these children, because they're concerned about their own safety, the safety and the well-being of these kids when they're separated from their moms. Their parents, too. Thank you. If you'd like to answer the questions. Not I.
Congressman, in my 27 years career, I've worked under several different administrations, and during those administrations, with the change, laws continually change, the way we're enforcing laws, and again, what you're speaking about now in the current, environment, I am not involved with what you're speaking about. We are involved in the aftermath if there are individuals who are being exploited, who are victims, who are being exploited by organizations. That is where we will come in to try to look at the people who are facilitating this activity.
Thank you. I yield back. Thank you.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair would now recognize Mr. Budd for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and again, thanks to the witnesses for your time today, for your expertise, all you do for security for our country. And I want to shift a bit to the topic, the original topic at hand, terror financing and virtual currencies. So the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, or FDD, they've been a great resource to me and staff on issues like this. And they recently reported the first publicly verifiable instance of an online propaganda unit. It was based in Gaza, in the Gaza Strip, calling for Muslims worldwide to donate funds for terrorist purposes. They only raised a few $100s, but even this is an early sign, I'm thinking, and it's disturbing that terrorist financing mechanisms are evolving using this technology. I've also seen evidence of Hamas groups embracing the technology and promoting wallet apps like Telegram. So the question is, what's the likelihood that we see more propaganda or terrorist campaigns from groups like this in the future, and what can be done to prevent it from happening?
I'm familiar with the article that you mentioned, and I would agree with you that I believe there was only 2 individuals that actually volunteered to donate. It was somewhere in the vicinity of $500 that was received. So although it was a low turnout as far as volunteers, it is something that law enforcement would be concerned about, because as virtual currency continues to grow, it's certainly an avenue that could be used for those type of propaganda situations to collect money in support of terrorist organizations.
So even at a few $100s, we still shouldn't dismiss something like this?
Absolutely not.
Okay, thank you. Can you tell me what factors are limiting terrorist exploitation of virtual currencies? Basically, what's working and how that should impact the counterterrorism community and Congress' focus on this front?
So one of the challenges, I think, is terrorist organizations are used to the traditional money laundering slash bulk cash smuggling hawala situations. I think one of the challenges that we may be facing for the traditional terrorist organizations that we're speaking about is maybe some of the resources, logistics, some of the locations that they're involved in, that they don't have the technology right now. But over time, as technology advances, et cetera, that certainly would be a concern. In lone wolf terrorist type of situations where you may have a domestic terrorism situation, that to me would be a concern because they would have the technology, they would have the access to the internet, et cetera, working right home from their computers, and that certainly would be a concern.
Thank you. Gentlemen, do you care to comment on what's working and how you would ask Congress to focus on this front?
From the Secret Service standpoint, our area is not terrorism or counterterrorism, but what we see is that on the criminal side, with the exploitation of digital currency to move forward with their crimes, we know that terrorists look to and gain education from how the criminals are doing things. And so however the criminals are moving money, and then they can learn from that. So from my expertise, as I see it rising in criminal activity, I would assume that at some point the terrorists will start learning from the criminals.
Good.
From FinCEN's perspective, I would just mention that we work very closely in partnership with the financial institutions in terms of our outreach, and we have seen from 2016 to 2017 a 90% increase in the BSA filings involving some type of cryptocurrency across a variety of criminal activities, whether that is terrorist financing, narcotics trafficking, money laundering, or other illicit activities. So to that extent, we are very pleased with the increase of that type of law enforcement intelligence that we can share with our counterparts.
Thank you all for this. And a little bit different type of a question, but I'd like to get law enforcement's perspective on this. And it's a hot topic right now, especially here in D.C. as we look at this as legislators. But how should we classify virtual currencies? Is it a security? Is it a commodity, another form of property? And what's the appropriate framework for us to use to work on legislation addressing virtual currencies?
Thank you, Congressman. I think, again, from FinCEN's perspective, we certainly recognize that this is a complex area. We focus on money transmissions specifically. So our concern is the transmission of either currency, funds, or what we say is other value that substitutes for currency. And we've said that in our guidance and in our legislation that the current virtual currency is also included in that definition of other value that substitutes for currency. So we feel that our certain regulatory regime right now that we have in place is sufficient to cover virtual currency and to provide the correct reporting. And I'd also say that applies to whether or not an MSB or a money transmitter is located within the continental United States or outside the United States, but does either substantial business within the United States or other.
Time has expired. I yield back.
The chair would now recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sitting here, and I'm absolutely amazed. You all are sitting here and sort of just seemingly unknowledgeable about one of the greatest tragedies that we are faced with the treatment of these little children at the borders. Now, Mr. Devano, several members have asked you and questioned you and reminded you that you do have responsibility here. You keep saying you don't. Your entity deals with MS-13s, the gangs, the drug cartels, all of the very reason that we got this situation today. These people are putting their children first. I looked up there. I saw this picture of this little girl. I wish they put it back up there at the truck, and she's looking up. And you know what I saw from that? I saw what the Lord said. Suffer the little children to come unto me, for of such is the kingdom of God. I mean, if you really understand that scripture, it was because people were trying to push this one up to see that one up. But he said, no, it's the children that come first. That's why this nation is crying out to stop this meanness. There's the picture right there. Look at it. Mr. Navarro, there it is right there. Would you mind? That is the image of the United States of America. We've got to stop it now. And if you can't give information to us, you are the representatives of this administration. That ain't the Democrats causing this. It is President Trump. And take a message back to him that the Lord said, first, suffer the children to come unto me, for of such is the kingdom of God. That's the scripture that they should be admonishing. Tell me, Mr. Navarro, when was the first tolerance, the zero tolerance policy first put into place?
Congressman, I'm not specifically aware of when it was put in place. My recollection from hearing it in the news was maybe sometime around April.
How many children have been reunited since the zero policy is put in place?
Again, I do not work in that directorate, so I do not have that information.
And you can see from the pictures there that most have not been reunited. What's going to happen to these children? How many people who legally entered this country to seek asylum have been detained as a result of this policy?
Again, I do not have those numbers with me.
How many children separated from their families on the U.S.-Mexican border have had to enter the foster homes, the foster care as a result of this administration's decision?
I do not have that information.
Yeah. How many children may never see their mothers or their families again because of what this administration has decided to do on the borders? Think about it. I'm telling you, man, we've got to stop this. If there's any message to take back to the White House, take him to stop it. This country has been blessed by God. Divine intervention is throughout our history, from the soldiers at Valley Forge to those who went to the of Montezuma fighting. We are the beacon of hope, liberty, freedom of the world. The little girl on these pictures looking up, that ain't America. Please, will you take that message back to the president?
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair would now recognize Mr. Christ for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a few questions for you, Mr. Navarro. How many children have been separated from their families since the Trump administration announced this zero-tolerance policy on April 6, 2018?
I don't have that information. Happy to take it back for the record and see if our enforcement removal or other component within DHS can get that information for you.
Thank you, and I'll provide these for you before you leave. What's the plan to reunite the children with their parents?
Again, I'm not involved in the policy making or that side of the enforcement house, so I don't have that information. But again, happy to take that back for the record.
Physically, where is your office?
It's located at 12th and D Street, sir.
And your colleagues there, have you had any conversations about what's all over the news for the past 72 or so hours? Any concern about it?
mean, I watch the news every morning like everyone else, and obviously see what's going on, but it's not a topic of conversation within my directorate because, again, we're not involved in that activity.
Nobody there has talked about this.
Absolutely. It's on the news. Everyone's watching it, but it's not a conversation that I have. I was here to prepare for virtual currency, and that's how I spent, my past week or so, preparing for this hearing on virtual currency.
You've dedicated your life, it sounds like, to appropriate law enforcement.
27 years I have.
Do you think this is the right kind of law enforcement for the United States of America?
Again, I'm not here to give my opinion. I am a sworn law enforcement officer that I was sworn to defend the laws of the United States, but I'm not here to comment on my personal situations. Happy to, take any questions you may have.
I'm not asking about your personal situation. I'm just asking your opinion, sir.
Yeah, I don't have an opinion on that, sir.
Okay. That's interesting. You have no opinion on this?
I have an opinion on what my job is and what I am required to do. And
no, I'm talking about what we're talking about.
Congressman, anyone who looks at that picture obviously would, have concerns looking at that picture. I faced several of these, situations in my career as an immigration inspector. And what I've done is, if I was directed to do something, I would do what the direction of my superiors in my administration told me what to do.
Even if you felt it was wrong?
That is my job. I swore to uphold the Constitution of the United States.
Well, what if it's not a constitutional act they're asking you to do?
It may be a directive that we're following that's from our leadership, and that is what I do on a day-to-day basis. If I get, direction from my leadership, I follow what my leadership's directives are.
Follow right or wrong?
It's not my decision to make, Congressman.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, you're a citizen of this country. You don't have to do everything you're told to do if you think it's wrong and or immoral.
If it was something that was immorally correct or is not legal, then obviously I would not do that. But
I'm glad to hear that.
yeah, absolutely. I'm 27 years, and I've been doing my job for 27 years. I'm a family member. Obviously, situations like that, when you see that, touch everyone's heart. But again, we're not the ones to blame for this situation, meaning me as a special agent within my Homeland Security Directorate. If laws need to be changed, they need to be changed, but it's not me to make the change in the law.
I'm not blaming you. I didn't say that. Who do you think is to blame for this?
I think obviously the laws need to be changed. I'm not here to say who's responsible for it, but if the laws need to be changed, it's not for me as a Deputy Assistant Director at my level to be making those changes.
Do you know if any children have been physically harmed or died while in this custody since April?
That I'm not sure about.
Can you find out?
Happy to take any questions you have and get it to the appropriate locations within the Department of Homeland Security.
Thank you for your help.
Chair would now recognize Mr. Heck for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to all the witnesses for being here today. I'm not sure who can answer this question. Anybody that has the answer, I'd appreciate. How long is the list of mothers with young children who have been detained at the border that are suspected or known to have used cryptocurrency for illicit purposes?
I'm not aware of that.
Any? So we can at least eliminate that category of reason to be afraid of young mothers with young children. Mr. Navarro, you've had a distinguished career, and I sincerely thank you for that at ICE. I'd like to ask you if you believe that the current resources provided ICE and the staffing levels that result therefrom are 100% sufficient for the agency to fulfill its mission in a robust fashion.
Congressman, we have plus or minus 6,500 special agents within the Homeland Security investigations. We could obviously use more.
Sir, I asked about the agency overall, drawing upon your 27 years. The question's very straightforward. Does the agency overall, from where you sit, based on your 27 years of experience, have 100% of the resources and staffing it needs in order to fulfill its mission in a robust fashion?
Again, I am familiar with my directorate, which is Homeland Security Investigations. I'm not familiar with the other components within DHS. There's over 22 components within DHS. I'm not familiar with every other component.
Is it your impression you have all the staffing and resources you need?
Within Homeland Security investigations, we could certainly use more.
So if that is also true at the other divisions at ICE, we can reasonably and logically conclude that if they were asked to do anything additional, it would only come at the compromise or result in a compromise of their effort to fulfill their mission. There is a federal prison, Mr. Navarro, in Victorville, California, where we now have about 1,000 ICE detainees. Do you know whether or not the guards there have been trained to deal with the non-criminal occupants and immigrants at that facility?
No, I'm not, Congressman. Not aware.
Do you know whether or not the immigrant detainees are being accorded the same rights and privileges as the prisoners, violators of crimes, such as visitation and access to counsel and recreational opportunities?
I'm not familiar with the situation in that facility.
I have a facility in my district. It's called the Selma Carson Home, at which 16 and 17-year-old unaccompanied boys are kept. Do you know if the current population includes anyone that has been separated from their parent?
I do not.
I guess I'd like to make an observation, if I may, about this overall issue, because the truth of the matter is I completely understand somebody that is deeply concerned about our nation's security in general, and as it even relates to some degree with respect to borders. What's difficult for me to understand is the obsession on just one border and the obsession on only one fix to the issue there. I guess I kind of can't forget the fact that a goodly number of the people who helped plot and implement the 9/11 attack on our soil, the deadliest in our nation's history, came in through the northern border. Not a lot of talk about enhanced northern border security. And I am very mindful of the fact that nearly 50% of the people who were here without the appropriate documents came in legally and just stayed. And yet, all the focus seems to be on one of our four borders. The water on our east and west kind of take care of that. Nothing on the north, for all practical purposes, nothing on the way that people who come here legally but stay. I guess in simpler terms, this strikes me as if somebody owned a home and they felt that they had a security risk of being robbed, they'd decide to build two walls, not four, two, in order to protect themselves, or even one wall, leaving the other two or three open. I guess that'd be one way to try to protect themselves, not very effective. Or they could buy an alarm system, or they could put up increased lighting, or they could trim the bushes that provide cover for people, or they could buy a dog, or. My point being that the issue of security has to be solved intelligently, not just with a half-baked, half idea on how to provide for our nation's security. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
The gentleman's time has expired. The chair would now recognize Mr. Capuano for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. And honestly, I was looking forward to having a hearing on the subject matter that was advertised, but with today's crisis, I assume by now you've figured out we just can't do that. We can't remain silent. Mr. Navarro, I see you have an excellent education. I'm a BC guy, too. My son is as well. I don't remember being taught by any of the Jesuits that it was okay to separate parents from children. And I want to be real clear. You have been incredibly professional under some tough questionings, and I respect your position, and I'm not going to try to put you in a tough position, because I think you've done a good job today defending the indefensible, or actually avoiding defending the indefensible. And I really do. I appreciate what you're doing. I don't want to put you in a tough position. But you know you're the guy who's here. You're the guy we got. And I'm sorry, but is there anybody behind you who can answer any of the questions that have been asked today? I don't know, is there anybody else from ICE that are here that can answer these questions?
I don't believe there's anybody with me here today from Customs and Border Protection and Enforcement Removal Operations that may have some of those answers to your questions.
Okay, I expected that. I know you've heard the audio before, but I want to play that audio just one more time, because I do have a question related to it. I don't know exactly how this technology stuff works, but there's a guy in the back room doing some magic, so.
¿De dónde son ustedes? ¿Y tú?
I think that's enough. I think that's all we need. I appreciate it. Thank you. Did you hear any MS-13 members in that audio?
I did not.
I didn't either. Any other gang members that you could tell, you know, that secret code that we could tell that these children were somehow associated with an international gang that's come here to terrorize us?
I did not.
No, I didn't either. It's kind of interesting that the president was able to hear that. I don't know. I know you've been testifying for a while. I don't know if you're caught up in the news. You're probably not. But if you are, it's been announced that the president has just signed an order reversing his previous order. So I assume your agency is going to get some new orders. But I'm interested. I just heard the last 3 days the President of the United States telling me repeatedly on the news, very publicly, that he didn't have the authority to change his own zero tolerance policy, and now he's done it. Could you explain to me how the president could say for 3, 4, 5 days in a row he didn't have the authority and now somehow have the authority? Is anybody at ICE going to ask questions as to who actually has the authority to make a determination whether children can be ripped from the arms of their mother?
I don't have that answer for you today, sir.
I'm just kind of curious, because it strikes me if the president says for day after day after day on TV that he doesn't have the authority and then now he does, I don't know, but I'm just guessing that if that was somebody else that he didn't like, that the president would say that person was lying and had been lying for day after day after day. I'm just confused how the president can do that. And I know that, again, I know that you're going to carry out the orders, and I respect that. I really do. I respect that. But at some point, somebody at DHS, somebody at ICE is going to have to look in the mirror and ask themselves whether they want to keep doing this. Are you from Mass, or just were lucky enough to go to BC?
No, I am from Massachusetts.
Then you remember the name Elliot Richardson, our former state attorney general who became the U.S. attorney general?
I am familiar with that name.
Elliot Richardson quit when the President of the United States ordered him to take action he found to be immoral. He quit his job. Now, I'm not asking any lying guy, a 27-year career guy, to do that. That's a little much. But somebody, somewhere at DHS and ICE, at some point, is going to have to ask themselves, when is it too much? When are the orders too much? I can't do them. And again, I'm not suggesting it should be you or anybody in particular, and I really hate even putting that question to a career guy. I really would rather put that question to a political appointee. That would be people above your pay grade, and I get it, but again, and I apologize as I did earlier, I have to say some of these things to you. I don't really mean to direct them to you. You seem like a nice guy doing your job. But until and unless we have access in a public forum to the people that can answer these questions and can make those decisions, unfortunately, you're kind of stuck here. And I actually feel bad that your superiors put you in this position today to have to take this abuse. And again, it's not directed at you, but I will be very clear. It is unequivocally directed at your superiors who do have the authority to say no and should have said no to this policy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's time has expired. I'd like to thank our witnesses for your testimony today. Without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within which to submit additional written questions for the witnesses to the chair, which will be forwarded to the witnesses for the response. Ask our witnesses to please respond as promptly as you're able. This hearing is adjourned.